we were doing this tech conference back in September, and we're in our eCam headquarters. Everything is going along swimmingly, and all of a sudden, Cox Cable decided to just not work in the middle of this important event. There's a couple thousand people like ready to see what's going on, and normally these things happen. It's a blip. It's a 5 minutes or 10 minutes blip or whatever. No, it was like the whole rest of the day. So I streamed the entire second half of a multi-thousand person conference with an iPhone 12 because Speedify kept it going.
You saw part
Really?
of it? Cool.
Nice. All right, we are famous. You want to say hi to everybody? Now you're on the video. It's a wave. That's the camera right there. Nice. All right. We are going back to look at this guy's house. And it has a lot of white lights. It's nice. I like the wreath. Oh, we didn't notice what's going on in the basement window. It's snowing.
Some takeaways are, first guys, get started. If I look back at my original lives, they are awful. They're terrible. But we all start somewhere and we all get better. And every time you go live and every time you get on camera, you're going to get a little bit more comfortable.
There he is. Hey, Christian.
Fine.
I think that's where you've got to be a little bit creative. You've got to kind of jump through the screen, and the only way you can jump through the screen is, I think you've got a Peroni like I do.
I do have a Peroni.
And in a few minutes, I think, or maybe now, we're going to open it, but we can share the exact same beer together and we can talk about it. And all of a sudden now, we've reached each other at a deeper level.
But it was like a hard drop. Stream ended. Concurrent viewership halved or thirded. Is if you lose internet connection, even if you have a
Brutal
dedicated,
how fast they go. Yeah.
they'll switch to Netflix. There's too many entertainment options. So I was sitting there like the first time it happened. What can I do? And I looked over at my backpacks of the gear that runs on Speedify. You paid for a year of it. You can use it on any computer or device. So I just pulled out my one of several hotspots I have, hooked it up, cranked up Speedify, and it has never been a problem since.
And lo and behold, you've got one microphone in there, you've got two dongles in there, you've got an Ethernet there, and you've got Wi-Fi running on the thing as well. If only we had some software that we could bond all those signals together and broadcast over. Hey, guess what we did? We started using yours. Others I don't think are available, but we haven't used others. But what we did was we used the Speedify software at a command line level. So it's not running a whole UI which is starting to drain resources. It's really very, very base level. And the really clever people at the BBC got it all working. And we're now presenting whole programs every single day of the year have been presented using this technology. All our weather reports from our weather presenter are done on them.
And we're actually at an hour here, but if you don't mind, I'm happy to keep going. I won't.
Yeah, I mean, this build's going to be done in like a minute, so. But here's the build. I don't have a power cable, unfortunately, or I don't have one readily available, but this is what it looks like.
Nice.
Good to go.
We're using software like Speedify to bond our internet connections. So we're using both the iPhone 12's cellular connection, and it's connecting to this Android phone in my hand and using its Verizon connection. So hopefully we get good video even though we're walking around in West Philadelphia. We also talk about stuff like, how to run your business with live streaming. And I think Nate's gonna have a lot of insights. You guys slide over that way. You're about to walk on the railing. A lot of insights because he's
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm your host, Alex Gizis, and this is the 66th episode of Speedify Live, the show where we talk about everything that is streaming, right? We talk about the technology you need to create great content, cameras, lights, microphones, software. We talk about how to create engaging, shows and content that make people want to come back. We talk about the business. How do you get people to watch the stream? How do you get sponsors? How do you make a living doing this stuff? So our special guest tonight is Brent Haliburton. Hey, Brent.
Hey.
So Brent is the host of the Trashalanche Podcast, covering all things Pokemon. He is the author of How to Train Your Pokemon, Winning at the Pokemon Trading Card Game, and The Lean Guide to Digital Advertising. He's a successful entrepreneur who has started and sold 2 companies, one with me as his business partner. And he is the father of some of the best Pokemon card game players in the world. So, hey, Brent.
Yo.
You want to tell? Why don't we start? You want to tell us about Trashalanche, your podcast?
Sure. Let's take a step back, and I'm interested in your perspective on this, Alex. I think
Please.
One of the things I've realized about myself is, as I have evolved, I've realized that I have an artist deep inside me, just dying to create. And what I love about product management and entrepreneurialism is fundamentally it's an act of creativity, right? And if you look at the list of weird websites I built, it's without end.
I can't tell the story of all the websites you built in '94 because it sounds like I'm lying, right? That search engine you built that anonymizes your searches and spreads them across, it was before Google, Alta Vista and Yahoo, and recombined the results. I mean, all that stuff that DuckDuckGo is doing now. And people are so excited. Look at this incredible stuff DuckDuckGo is doing. You built it in '94 and, messed around with it for 6 months, declared it a success and threw it away.
So little known Alex Gizis fact. Alex, besides being the amazing host of Speedify, is also an incredibly talented artist. He can actually draw. Exactly. Yeah. He's as surprised as anyone else is. One of the things that I realized is, while I have this desire to create, in terms of that kind of artistic talent, I have, as you know, 0. If there's less than 0, I have less than 0. But I can express creativity through code, and that's an interesting thing. One of the things I always wondered about is with painting or with drawing, I'm sure I was always a little bit stupefied because no matter how good you are at drawing, I felt you must look at your drawing and say it's flawed. How could someone be happy with it because it's probably not perfect? And then I was able to I had this realization, I guess, a year or 2 ago, where I was oh, it's the bad websites I build. If I get it to a point where I say, I am happy with this, even though I recognize it could be better, I am happy with it. Art has been created.
You also, that same year, created that thing for letting people write text files where they could use asterisks as bullet points, right? You had all the text highlighting, and then you had a script that converted it to HTML. It's Markdown. You invented that in '94 as well. How we failed to get rich having you pouring out ideas that whole year. The answer is we were too early, right?
Right. Too early
in
and too
January '94, you and I were able to visit every website on the internet
I tell people that story all the time. True story of the internet, people. Alex and I were on the internet so early. Each day, you could surf all of the new web pages that had been created that day. Because, like, why not? And, like, you know, if you had extra time, you could go visit every web page that existed on the internet because there just weren't that many. There were so few. There was a web page that had a list of all the new web pages created each day. You just go to it, you visit all the web pages that were created that day, and be like, we did a thing.
Yeah,
it's wild, right? But so I've over the course of pandemic, I've thought of so many I kept thinking I need to do stuff. So I come out of pandemic feeling like I was productive during that 2 years, you know, like all that commute time I clawed back. I was like, we got to convert this into output in some way. And I didn't want my employer to just be the beneficiary of that output. I didn't want to turn 8-hour days into 10-hour days just because I wasn't spending 2 hours commuting. Like I was like, we need to turn that 2 hours into something magical. And
nice.
I mean, I've gone through so many stupid ideas, man. Like I thought about buying like a paint by numbers kit and like taking up painting. I still think about that. And I wonder if painting by numbers would be the perfect combination of my lack of skill and my comfort with a mediocre output. And I would say, oh, that's like, okay. I sense it wouldn't, but like,
I feel like I mostly failed at capturing that extra time, right? At the beginning, I was so good. I was going to master the guitar finally and up my yoga game. And
right. Like
I watched everything on Netflix instead.
Yeah. Like I started playing guitar a little more and I was like, man, that's not it. Like guitar is a perfect example. Guitar is another good example of like, if you can play the songs you want, I mean, you still can't play, like there's certain things that you just can't do, but like you can be happy with the art that you've created and you can say this art was good enough. Mm-hmm. And so I was on this like hunt for like creative outlets for my energy. And I had talked with a number of people about doing a Pokemon podcast because there like weren't really Pokemon podcasts. And then eventually I was just like when pandemic started, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And like, what's funny about it is on the one hand, it was a viable outlet for like my creative mojo, but so dumb because I mean, they had just canceled every Pokemon tournament for the foreseeable future. So like we were talking about like the Pokemon card game, like there was nothing happening with the Pokemon card game. Now it's a great time for a podcast because tournaments have restarted and we got the magic happening.
Nice. So they're back in person?
They are. It's the very first one was in Brisbane, Australia 3 weekends ago. And then 2 weekends ago was Salt Lake City, Utah, and we did not attend that. And then last weekend was Liverpool, England. And as a result, we're like seeing a metagame. We're seeing people have strategies and they're evolving and like, whoa, Pokemon, it's back, it's amazing.
So what gets published? I mean, is it like chess that the moves get published after a tournament or whatever? Or is it not that?
Interesting. Like, chess is a great game, right? And so maybe you and I have talked about this. and you know, I've told this joke many times too, Alex, but it's worth taking a moment. Alex, actually, I don't know if you and I have really discussed this, but I have had the realization that I am like the worst person in the world to discuss chess with. I am I like walk by two people playing chess and I'll casually say, well, why don't you do that? And it turns out that is definitely a terrible move. And after I say it, they'll look at it and say, that does seem reasonable, and do it. And like, it's checkmate 2 moves later. Worst possible thing you could do. Yeah. Oh, I'm so bad at that. But so the thing I always do when it comes to games is there's like I have a spectrum of like random to not random. right? Like chess, it's all the way at the not random side.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Perfect information, no luck.
Exactly. All the knowledge is public, the whole 9 yards. Whereas random is shoots and ladders.
Yeah.
There's no decisions. You just roll the dice and pray. And like what's interesting is when little kids learn to play games, they all start with a game like shoots and ladders because they're like, the whole point is you're just trying to teach them to follow rules and take turns.
Yeah.
Outcome doesn't matter. And you're like, the good news is skill doesn't matter in this game. So, hey. But so Pokemon, so audience, let me tell you about Pokemon. So Pokemon's printing cards every quarter, right? They have like a quarterly release schedule where they release new cards. And usually they release about like 100 to 150 cards. Like per set so every quarter. And then the way the Pokemon money machine works is in competitive. Hey, look, Pokemon cards.
Pokemon cards. That's what you get when you buy one of these things. Apparently someone here ran out and got some Pokemon cards.
Dude, this is the good stuff here. So you have in your hands a 60 card deck.
All right.
So essentially you take, so the way the Pokemon money machine works is they print every quarter, they print 125-ish new cards. And then every 2 years, they retire the previous year's set. Hey, look at that. Is that a Corviknight?
That is a Corviknight.
There we go.
Is that good?
It's probably not, but like, you know.
But we can pretend.
Exactly. You bought a pre-made deck. What do you expect? Terrible things happen. So you build your 60 card deck and you take it to your favorite Pokemon tournament. And at a Pokemon tournament, you submit a list of your 60 cards. And the idea is you play those 60 cards for the duration of the tournament without changing. And your 60 cards get matched up against everyone else's 60 cards. And you play the game and you see who wins. So usually the output of at the end of a tournament, like what people are interested in is what was the 60 card list that did the best at that tournament? Because theoretically, that's the best deck, right?
Right.
It's difficult. Usually people play like best 2 out of 3, but it's difficult. Although I've dabbled on a project to try to express it, to kind of say how people won, because a big part of it is like you shuffle your deck and your deck is like kind of randomized, so there's no way to express like what the third card in the deck was or something. Like you could never quite quote recreate that game without knowing the order of the deck at different points in the game. So it's a weird thing, right? And there's tons and tons of shuffling in the game. So like you're constantly re-randomizing the deck. So recreating the game state is theoretically extremely difficult. Which is kind of a shame.
So I guess is it safe to say that strategy is picking your deck and tactics is actually playing the cards?
Yeah, I think that's right. Right, like I mean, one of the funny things about the game, so this is one of my to-dos to talk about for this, because I think it's interesting, is when you're running a podcast about it, there's an element of sorrow I sometimes have, because it's not like sports. Like theoretically, given a hand of X, like when you think about what the tactics are, there's theoretically a mathematically optimal strategy in any given situation. Mm-hmm. Like it's just, this is the right play and every other play is wrong, and that's kind of how it is. And like the best players, they play like robots, Like there's maybe sometimes a little bit of an element of like bluffing or something like that. Like you could kind of pretend like you might have a card for next turn. In like, like maybe if you have a 5-card hand, you're like, well, I could play 4 of the cards and leave myself with 1 card for next turn. And, maybe my opponent will assume that that's a good card, or maybe he'll assume that my hand is pretty dead. Or like I could try to keep more cards in my hand to make it seem like I have lots of choices. Although if I don't play a lot of cards this turn, maybe it'll seem like I don't have a lot of choices. At some level, that's the whole bluffing story there. Like, it doesn't get more complicated than that. I mean, the real truth is you should do the mathematically optimal thing to try to drive you to some outcome, you know?
Yeah. Have you read Nate Silver's The Signal and the Noise?
No, I haven't.
He's got a chapter there about the couple of years he spent as a professional poker player. And he said the key, you learn the mathematical rules and you play like a robot and you convince some sucker big whales to come into the game and you win. And he says the biggest problem for professional poker players is even though they know it, they know the rules, sometimes when they lose, they panic. And they start, not following the rules because they need to catch up. And it's always a disaster. And he knew it and he still did it a couple times. And he saw other players, they knew it and they still did it a couple times. You just play like a robot.
So maybe this must have been like 6 or 8 weeks ago. There was a really good article in the Sunday Times about how poker's been solved. Did you see that perchance?
I didn't.
It's totally random. What I thought was interesting about it, I hadn't when I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, I guess it kind of is that way, even though I didn't think about it this way. It's like, I think most people, when you just think about poker, if I say these are the or blackjack or whatever, or poker, sorry. You have these two cards and you look at them and you look at what's on the table and you say, here's what I should do, right? Like, we expect that the answer is this deterministic outcome, but the real answer is it's probability curve. Yeah. And if you're holding an ace and a king and there's a queen jack 9 on the table, the answer is, 20% of the time you just fold, doesn't matter. 30% of the time you go all in and bluff. There's this whole distribution of that way, because you have to be able to make your bluffs more effective when you bluff.
Yeah. Johnny von Neumann's min-max game theory.
Exactly. This whole scenario of how you're supposed to be playing on this probability curve. And they said, yeah, the problem they have now in poker is everybody's seen the models and they just grind out games now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he talked about how a big part of it was in fact, professional poker players had an obligation to convince rich suckers to come into the game. Right. If you didn't, sometimes the other professional poker players would stop letting you play with them. You had to contribute a certain number of suckers.
Yeah.
Who didn't know the rules.
Pokemon has a more a less probabilistic kind of gameplay model, I think. Yeah, I mean, definitely does. Because there's less interaction essentially from hand to hand, and as a result, I mean, the good news is there's still very high RNG in the game, and yet despite the fact that the randomness is pretty high, you still see the same guys winning tournaments, game in, game out. So tournament in, tournament out. So apparently the RNG is not so high that the right amount of strategy and the ability to be more robotic than everybody else doesn't lead the best players to victory.
Right. So we are live. So if you guys have any questions for Brent or I, just post them down below and we'll answer them. Tim is asking about running Speedify stuff on his cloud infrastructure. Send an email to support@speedify.com. That's a whole different topic about licensing the SDK to put it in your app and all that stuff. It can be done. It's kind of a big deal. We're not going to, yeah.
Tim, you asked such a good question. They would have to do a whole separate live stream just for that.
That's correct. I have presentations on that.
Exactly. You would not want to miss the full song and dance.
Hey. All right. Yeah. So for anyone who's just looking for support, it is support@speedify.com. And we'll get back to you. So what tools do you use to make the podcast? What software?
So we have 3 kind of genius steps. Oh man, my dog wants to come into the room. Just a second.
All right. Well, Kane is asking if you can still hear me.
What's up,
Can
Dan?
a rich guy just buy the best of the best Pokemon cards and always have the best deck?
This is a great question, Kane. Great question. The answer is no, because the good news is when you talk about strategy, the strategy for winning a Pokemon is not simply put these cards in, put those cards in. There's a little bit of Rochambeau-ness to Pokemon. So, for example, water Pokemon are very good at defeating fire Pokemon, and fire Pokemon are good at defeating grass Pokemon. So, if you thought that the best card, hey, the dog is climbed onto the bedside table to see if my son left any food. She's amazing. So if you thought that the best card in the game was a fire Pokemon, like say Charizard, you could play a water Pokemon like Squirtle and theoretically dramatically improve your matchup. So that kind of like guessing the gamesmanship is a big part of picking the right 60 cards for your deck. So I can give you a great example. So there's 3 age divisions in Pokemon. There's juniors, who are like 11 and under. There's seniors, who are like 11 to 15. And then there's masters that are 16 plus. And it's a fantastic trait that Pokemon has, because Pokemon is really like the only card game that has an age division for the kids. Like if you played a game like Magic the Gathering, they just put them all in one bucket because they don't care about kids. Pokemon, it's for the kids. What up? It's delightful in that way. So if you look at like how the Masters meta evolves from tournament to tournament, well, so the way the juniors pick their deck for a tournament is they look at the last tournament and they just play whatever deck did well. Because they're like, that's the good deck. That's the same 60. That's the best 60 cards. Let's go. What the seniors do is they say, we should play a deck that beats that deck. Because everybody's going to show up with that deck and I'll beat it and that's how I'll win. So all the seniors show up with a counter to the deck that won the last tournament every time. The masters play the counter to the counter. And sometimes they play the counter to the counter to the counter. And sometimes it turns out that the counter to the counter to counter is overreaching. And that's essentially what's going to determine the final outcome.
So,
right?
Well, so questions are, I was going to ask, do players have a weird bias towards fire? Because they think like fire is that a big thing? Because I know rock, paper, scissors. The best thing to do is paper, because so many men choose rock because rock is strong and smashes things. You know, if you had to pick one, paper wins the most because guys favor rock.
As I said, the best players, they're like robots. So I think they're able to take a like somewhat analytical perspective to the problem. I think there's no question. There's like moments where you feel like the way Pokemon thinks about and designs and prints cards, like they favor some Pokemon. Like if you look at the last 3 printings of Mewtwo, they've been really good cards. They freaking love Mewtwo. They're all, there's never a version of Mewtwo that's not a good card. It's always a great card.
Nice.
When
so
you look
Alexander
at
says he just saw a card being sold for $420,000. Is that true?
That is totally true, man. Card collecting is a great example, and let's be clear, I don't really understand card collecting.
If these cards expire after 2 years, why are these vintage cards worth so much?
Why is Honus Wagner worth like $10 million? I don't know. People be crazy. Like, it's interesting. I can't really speak to why collectors do what they do. I don't really understand collectors. And it's interesting because like the game itself is totally different than collecting. But I definitely feel like we just spent a lot of time talking about how people had to figure out like how they're going to occupy their time during the pandemic. I think a lot of people really got into collecting. Great example. So PSA is the company that grades all these cards, right? So if you say this is a perfect condition baseball card, football card, basketball card, Pokemon card, Magic card, whatever card, you can send it into PSA, and they're like the official company that grades these cards. That company was sold over the pandemic to a guy who made $1 billion selling his startup, and I think he realized baseball cards were his true love, so he decided to just buy the company. It's crazy. Very, very Jeff Bezos buying like the Washington Post kind of mojo. Like he was just like, I'm going to do this thing. But they got, over the course of the pandemic, they got so backed up with people sending them cards, they stopped taking cards for like 6 months. That's crazy to me, right?
Wow.
Yeah, like that business had so much demand, they stopped taking people's money for like half a year while they worked out their backlog. And no surprise, the billionaire, I think, was bringing in like software and new processes, and they were like trying to like tweak it up so it would go faster. But that's a crazy thing, right?
That is crazy. So Logan
like,
Paul paid $3.5 million for a box of cards. This is the
true
current
story.
chain.
So the $420,000 card, I think it was a Charizard, and like the thing that was associated with this might be near and dear to your heart. Like I think you know what? I don't think it was the $420,000. It was like a $60,000 card that this guy bought, and then he went to prison because he bought it with a PPP loan that he took out for his imaginary company. Did you hear that story? That's
No.
Great.
So Josh Koppelman, the head of First Round Capital,
Love Josh.
Sent us a little note saying, that he was going to do a call about the PPP, and that he thought that, even if he didn't invest in you, you might want to call in for it if you're running a startup in Philly. So,
Right.
Called in, and it was a good call. But one of his emphasis was he's like, they are giving away so much money. There is no way it won't be a scandal. They are going to come around and they are going to put someone in jail. Like, don't be that person. Like, do not lie on the application. Do not spend the money on anything but salaries. Be more careful than you think you need to, because someone is going to go to jail for being the person who abused the PPP to send a message. Yeah. So anyway,
I know the guys at Spark Capital spend a lot of time with their investments trying to go through each one and be like, should you guys ask for a PPP loan? And what's funny is I feel like, as somebody who didn't get involved in PPP loans at all, but like just as an innocent bystander watching all this afterwards, I feel like the moral story is like everybody should have gone in for a PPP loan, because like Bank of America took like a $10 million PPP loan. What? Bank of America, they don't got money problems. Like, I feel like there were so many big companies that took PPP loans. The optics for those guys are terrible. And like, no small guy's going to get in trouble.
Optics being bad in America. I mean, our attention spans are so short, right? I mean, I know so many like pro LGBTA people who, just kept hearing Chick-fil-A mentioned so much that they got a craving to go eat there, right? I mean, just, everybody's talking about it. Now I got the chicken sandwich on my mind. Our attention spans are so short, it's horrifying. Be watching a Will Smith movie in a week, right?
Oh, man. That's a weird one. The Will Smith thing is like, that's wild. Yeah. I wonder what must have gone through his mind at that moment. I mean, the rest of the internet can fight that battle. The rest of the internet. So if the cards expire after 2 years, the vintage cards are worth so much because, people. I think a lot of people, like, this collecting thing during the pandemic got big, and I think it's because it like harkens back to a joyful time in people's childhoods. So like, they remember busting open Pokemon packs when they were kids, and like it brings them joy. One of the things I've thought about recently, Alex, I keep telling my wife I'm trying to like mentally justify it for myself, and she's like, "You could just do it," and I'm like, "No, I have to justify it more." Is like, I really enjoyed having a comic book subscription when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like every like 2 weeks, I got a piece of mail, and it was awesome mail. And I keep trying to get my kids interested in comic books, and they're like not really feeling it. And I think it's just because they're surrounded with so much entertainment and like magical electronic devices these days. I sound like a cranky old man, and I know. I don't think it. I think I would just do the like Marvel subscription on like the iPad and flip through the comic books that way, and like I could catch up on all the 1,000 X-Men that I've missed since I last read the X-Men religiously.
Marvel Unlimited. $10 a month on the iPad, you can read every comic book that's more than 6 months old. So I paid $10. I got it for 30 days. And for 30 days, it was 1 August 2 years ago, I think. Before bed, I read 4 comics. I read 120 comics, 3 years of the Fantastic Four, reread all the Secret Wars, and I just binged 120 comics in 30 days and then canceled it. I can't.
So why cancel it after 30 days? I assume after 30 days you were feeling like it was going awesome.
It kind of was, but
exactly.
I hadn't read anything but a comic book in a month.
I feel like kind of the same way. I'm like, on the one hand, I'd have to read a lot of comic books to make me feel like I could justify doing it. And my wife's like, it's $10, you could just do it. I'm like, no, I have to really
$120 a year.
yeah. So I think I feel the same way you did. Like I would have to really be grinding these comic books to spend another second month of money on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Logan Paul $3.5 million thing. This is a really interesting story, actually. It just like I think this is an interesting story about streaming and everything too, right? You're familiar with this Logan Paul guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, if you say yes, then you're probably more familiar with him than I am. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's that guy. So there was this box of first edition Pokemon cards. So the way Pokemon sells its stuff is, I think everybody's familiar with the little silver packs, right? The packs contain like 10 cards. It's a booster pack. It's like $5 at Target. Everybody buys booster packs. It's like what people do, right? And so a booster box is 36 packs. It's like 2 columns, 18 by 18. It comes in a box like about that big around, right? And then a case is 6 booster boxes. So that's like 200 and something packs. So they had a sealed case of first edition Pokemon cards. And theoretically, I mean, the going value for it was like a couple $1 million. The problem was like the barcodes on the outside of the box were weird. Like, if you guys go to pokebeach.com, I do not, I'm not the owner of this website. But I can tell you that pokebeach.com is a delightful website full of all kinds of fascinating, interesting things. And they really documented extensively when he was buying it. I mean, if you're looking for just the nerdosphere of cards, pokebeach.com is full of it. Probably what you have to do is you have to Google like Pokebeach and Logan Paul or something like that to like find the actual article. But like the barcode was a barcode that had not been used for first edition Pokemon. Like there were a lot of problems with the way that it was like being represented. And they brought in a authenticator to authenticate it. But there's like 3 companies that do authentication of cards. And the company that these guys that were selling the set brought in to authenticate it was like the 3rd company that had never done Pokemon cards before. They were like only baseball and football cards. So they, and when they authenticated it, all they did was they like inspected the outside to make sure that it had not been opened. And then they like wrapped it and sealed it and declared it authenticated. And like their process was substantially different than the process that like professional authenticators of Pokemon cards would use to make sure that like the box was the right kind of box and like all the stuff was the right kind of stuff. So there were like 15. And the guys were like selling it. They were like, we will only take cash. or it was like crypto or some crazy thing like that. There were like all these red flags where everybody kind of knew this is a fake. This is not like a real first edition box. Everyone knows it. It had been on sale for like 6 months and nobody had bought it. And it was like kind of market price. Like it was nothing special. I mean, the way I think it works is Logan Paul has such a powerful brand and identity. He was probably, I think he was like, if it turns out it's fake, I'll still make money. Just tell the people it was fake and I bought it. I mean, look at the brand. It's on our chat and we just spent 5 minutes talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So like if random collector X, who was like a judicious person who was buying for value, he looked at it and was like, nope, would never do that. Like, not going to get value from this. Like, the risk reward is way too high. But, like, Logan Paul, prominent streamer and content creator, is like, well, there's incremental value I get from just, like, creating content. I'll milk this shit for months. Let's go.
I mean, $3.5 million is, do that a couple times, you're talking about real money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it just makes you wonder how much money the Logan Paul like content creation machine makes, right? I mean,
yeah,
it must be wildly profitable to be Logan Paul, because like he doesn't have to get all the way to 3.5 million, because if it turned out it was a real set, like you got $3.5 million, but he could live with a lot more risk than any other buyer, because he had like an alternate revenue stream associated with a fake box of cards. Right? Like he does the video about buying it. He does the video about opening it. He does the video about it being fake. Like there's like 100 videos that all get 1 million views. How much money does he get for that? He's like, well, that offsets the risk adjustment here. It's a weird thing, man.
If it's fake, should he announce it's fake? Or should he do a video where he destroys the $3.5 million set of Pokemon cards? just thinking about how to monetize this.
I think he did both. I mean, I think he did all those videos, right? He does the video where he announces it's fake, and then he does the video where he says, I don't even know if it's fake and I'm destroying it. Like, he does all those videos. He's Logan Paul. I think he's both shameless and weird and, like, trying to create content, and feeling pressure, like kind of that Mr. Beastie pressure to like, how do we dial the next one up to even higher?
Yeah.
Like this that kind of level of content creation. There's so much Michael Bay sequel to it. It's a little strange. First you burn the box without ever opening it. Then we're going to burn the house the box is in without ever opening it. And it's a $3.5 million house. We're going to blow it up.
Yeah.
Like, all that stuff, right? It's weird. So I think all this is an interesting way of answering the question, how do I create the podcast?
That was the question that I was about to remind you.
Boy, how's this live stream working out?
Well, we got 156 people viewing. So.
Wild. Yes, you should definitely go find your kids' card collection and we can talk about NFTs too later. So here's what we do. We have a Google Doc. We share it with everybody on the pod. Sometimes we have a guest. We share the Google Doc with them, and the Google Doc is like we're just driving through this Google Doc, right? Like every week we update it. Probably like you guys, the Google Doc starts with like an intro and closes with an outro, and in between it's got a bunch of content, and we try to just like grind through the content. A lot of it is like, let's talk about this deck and its strategies. Let's talk about this tournament that happened last week and like what worked and what didn't work and who won it and who did well and what their strategy was and whether or not we've talked about that deck before. That's like so much of the podcast. So then to record it, we do a Zoom call and we just save the Zoom call. And then we use a product called Descript to edit the call. Have you ever used Descript? Have you looked at it?
I have. I've got to say, it is the neatest piece of software I discovered last year.
Right? It's kind of cute. So, so the way Descript works is, it takes an audio file and it auto transcribes it, and then you can edit the audio file by editing the transcription. So if you see a sentence you don't like, you delete the sentence. It deletes the sentence from the audio file because it connects the transcription to the audio file. That's super cool. So you want to hear something wild about this company? I don't know how much you looked into this company, but
the company, not really. We have a license, right? So we're using it, and we'll pull the content out here and kind of use that to eventually make some, I don't know, blog posts or something out of this.
You're gonna like this. The CEO is Andrew Mason, the guy that started Groupon.
Oh,
this is his next idea. Man,
nice.
We talk about people who are like creative types. Man, guy's coming up with creative stuff.
Yeah. Oh, good job. Yeah, that is the neatest new application I found last year. I mean,
it really
kind of amazing.
You've done a nice job there.
Right, and it'll ask you, if you start poking around the menu, it'll ask you, it'll give you samples, like, what's the name of this person, and play a sample. And I say, Alex. What's the name of this person? Brent. And then the script gets late, and every time people speak, it puts their names. And it gets like capitalization right. It puts commas in the right. I mean, it's kind of holy cow, right?
It is not very good at the name of Pokemon, but what can you do? When you say
you can
Charizard,
give it a list of weird words you use a lot, right? So
there's like a transcription dictionary you can provide it. It's okay with the transcription dictionary. I mean, we have a lot of weird words. It's okay.
Yes. So you got to put in Speedify, or it changes every Speedify to Spotify. And it doesn't know how to spell geezes.
Right.
And so, I came up with a list of about 30 words, and then after that, its transcription was mind-blowingly good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's like a small collection of weird words I use.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have like 900 Pokemon scattered across like 10,000 different kind of like subtly different card names, and the result is chaos every transcription. But like, I've just gotten comfortable with the fact that our transcriptions are like wildly wrong, and there you go. So here's the
what
worst
do you do with them?
Yeah, so here's the worst thing about Descript, or this is actually this is the worst thing about Zoom. So Zoom has a really nice feature that lets you record separate audio files for each person on the call. I don't know if you've ever experimented with that or had to mess around with this before.
I've seen it there. I've never used it.
So the three hosts, we all hop on a call. We record the pod. We save it to Zoom, and it outputs the three audio files, one audio file for each of us. And then you just drop it into Descript, and Descript recognizes that these audio files are like concurrent and creates a single like transcribed output of the conversation. But the Zoom people, in their infinite stupid wisdom, some like brilliant engineers' effort to save a couple of bytes of data, if you mute, it doesn't like make that as a silent period. It just slams it in. So if like somebody's spouse starts yelling at them during the pod and they hit the mute button, like we'll have a 45-minute pod and their thing will be 44 minutes long. Just random.
And they're answering questions just before they're asked, and you're like, oh, that's
exactly. And then I have to like go through and like carefully slice it and rearrange it. So we have a no mute policy on the pod to try to compensate. I'm like, guys, if your spouse comes in and starts yelling at you, we can all just shut up for a second, and then I'll delete all that, and it'll be fine. But if you mute, the whole podcast is off the rails.
I wonder, I have a mute button on my microphone. I wonder if it mutes it at the microphone, or does it tell the computer to mute it?
I don't know. It's an interesting problem.
And I'm not going to mess with it.
Exactly.
I'll mute myself, and I won't be able to unmute myself, and the whole stream will be wrecked.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the worst case scenario. So we output the whole thing into Descript, and then we use Buzzsprout as our like podcast publisher.
Tell us about Buzzsprout. I don't know about it.
Buzzsprout is like what's a good way? It's like the meta podcast machine. Apparently, it's a very common thing people use. If you're like, well, I want to be able to publish to Spotify and Amazon and iTunes with like kind of one button publishing. So you go in and you say, I'm publishing on these platforms, and here are my credentials for each of those platforms. And it says, okay, just fill in these like 5 fields, and that gives us all the metadata we need to publish to all the platforms. Done.
Yeah.
And then it rolls up like some basic stats across platform for you to look at and stuff like that. So they send me a nice email every week that says this is how many people listen to this week's pod. And I say, oh, that's great. Forward it to my co-hosts. And successful podcast achieved.
Nice. Do you do anything else with the transcripts? Is there a blog or?
We do nothing. We do nothing. So you know what's funny? I'm kind of torn about this. Like, there are all these people, and I think this is an element of the artistic thing. Like, part of the creative thing is, I think much like an artist, when I finish something, I'm like, okay, that's done. Let's move on to the next thing. It turns out I have very little interest in marketing.
Yeah, I hear you.
Like,
I keep hoping that if I build it, they will come.
Exactly. But
hasn't worked yet.
I mean, there are all of these Pokemon people, like people in the community that are trying to like make a living by being streamers or being content creators. And I have made it my job on our podcast to like mercilessly make fun of content creation. Like, people are always like, like if you look at the YouTube of like Pokemon trading cards or is there something besides YouTube? I guess like a little bit of Twitch or all that stuff. Like, I'm going live on Twitch. It's like, today we're checking out the new deck that won blah, 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 blah. We just make fun of those people mercilessly. Like the desire to create clickbait and like try to drive views. I mean, I recognize some people are trying to make a living doing that. And, you got to do what you got to do. It must suck.
So Barbara, for some reason, thinks that you have some opinions on the Sixers. I don't know where she gets that from.
Man. So how close are you following the Sixers these days, Alex? Are you still way on the train?
Yeah. I mean, I've gone to a couple games. I watch most on TV. I'm not obsessing about it. I kind of have it on all the time. If the Sixers are playing, it's on.
That's very balanced of you.
Thank you.
The Sixers. I mean, I'd like to. I mean, for better or for worse, this is probably as good as it's gonna get. I hope we make a deep run.
Yeah.
Like, I wish.
Embiid's not gonna last forever, and neither is Harden.
Yeah, like Harden seems a little bit like he's a little over the hill, and we're gonna supermax the heck out of him anyway because we don't even care. Because like, this is what we got. I mean, the good news is Ben Simmons' herniated disc is not our problem. Oh yeah.
So I mean, my opinion. I don't think Ben Simmons is good enough to play in the NBA. Period. Right? That inability to make foul shots.
Guys, this is a hot take. Those
playoff
people.
Those playoff games, when Atlanta discovered that anytime we were going up for a 3-point shot, you could just push Simmons. And then we didn't get to take the shot. He'd get the foul shots and he'd miss them. And it became impossible for the Sixers to he was worse than nothing. With his foul shooting, he's not good enough to be an NBA player. I mean, forget whether he's a star or a superstar. I don't know what those people are babbling about. With no free throw shooting, you're a liability. I mean, other teams, that nobody thought of it before then, but now everyone knows. You just shove Simmons. The other guy's going up for a shot, you shove Simmons.
I think part of what's interesting is, do I think the guy has mental health problems? For sure. Like, he's deeply, deeply in his own head by halfway through the Atlanta series. Like, what's the over under? So here's a great question that was discussed recently on Rice Ricky Sanchez. who will play more games for the rest of their NBA career? James Harden or Ben Simmons? Now, James Harden is like 32. Ben Simmons is like 25.
My guess is Harden.
Right? Like, there is an
It's
argument to be made. Like,
I wouldn't be surprised if we never see Simmons again, right? If by the time his back is better, he's 50 pounds overweight. And then
that was
he
my
spends
next
another
question. Like,
season getting
what's
back
the
into shape.
percentage chance that Ben Simmons never plays again? It's more than 1%, right?
Yeah, I think it's more than 25%, right?
Wow.
It's probably less than half, but I
That say more than 25%, I think is the hottest of takes, guys. This is the greatest stream maybe in the history of the internet right here. Stephen A. Gizis giving you guys
So I love Stephen A. Smith. I have to say, and I changed my opinion on him based on a single essay of his. He wrote an essay about how he represents the American dream, and I'll have to find it again. About how he just straight up admitted, he's like, I am not that smart. I wasn't raised rich. I'm not white, and I did things right, and I have a fantastic life now. And that's because, America. And, I don't know. That essay worked on me. And, now I see him, I'm like, his life is great. And he knows he's not that smart.
His takes are terrible. His takes are really, really.
I mean, he's usually wrong, but
yeah.
Well,
that's like, I recognize perfect example of like, he's a content creator, and they're like, we ain't paying.
He's got to drive clicks.
Have
right?
not hot takes. We only want the fire takes. So he's like, LeBron James won't win MVP. His son will win MVP. Like, just the hottest take you can have, because it, like, the whole goal is to draw attention. It's not to be right or wrong. It's just about attention.
So I don't know why I'm obsessing about this book again, but again, Signal and Noise. Yeah. He's got a chapter where he goes through and looks at different people who make predictions, and basically anyone who's on TV is like wrong all the time, like wrong so often that it's clear they're optimizing for something else, namely getting attention.
100%, right? Yeah, like the James Cramer joke. Like, he absolutely has no idea what to invest in. The only thing you can know for sure is his advice is terrible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we started. So here, I will give you. Here's my marketing strategy for the pod. This was my big innovation that no one else that was creating content for Pokemon did, and I did, and I was like, it is good. And it was for our first 60 episodes. At the end of it, while I was transcribing the episode. So here's my process for doing the transcription. Here's what I do with the Descript transcription. I play it back at 1.5 speed, because when I listen to podcasts, I listen to them all at 1.5 speed. And whenever I listen at 1 time speed, I'm like, my God, those people talk slow. Even myself, I talk slow, and I feel like I'm a fast talker. So I listen at 1.5 speed, and then basically what I do is I delete everything I say, because my stuff's the terrible takes on the pod. And we can talk more about that in a second. And while I'm going, I make a list of all the people that we mention on the pod, because the Pokemon community is kind of small enough that there's nobody else talking about that. So I think one of the things that we did was, instead of being fixated so much on this deck or this thing, we would talk about oh, this guy was playing this deck. And then if we talked about the guy, we'd say, then I would do a tweet where I said, so every week I would say, on the podcast this week, we mentioned these people. At Raul, at Azul, at Jack, at Natalie, and
you are good at marketing.
I'm pretty sure all those people felt like they had to listen to the pod, right? And half the time they felt like they had to like it because like I said, hey, we talked about you. And they're like, I like that. That's a good tweet. A high quality tweet there. And in that way, we like did the thing. Yeah, Brian, you got the right idea. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We're gonna have a tweet after this about the live stream where we say, hey, at Ben Simmons, we talk about you. He would not.
I don't think he's gonna like it.
Hey, Stephen A. Smith, we talk about you. And then Stephen A. Smith's going to listen to this pod, and then he's going to go back on ESPN and say, I was listening to this pod on Speedify Live. And like that was our whole marketing strategy. And
he starts ranting about Pokemon and gets fired. Because he learned the wrong lesson.
As long as it's a hot take, he's probably fine. He's like, that Charizard card, I'd have paid $1 million for it. Next question. Esports, it's up and coming. So, but like, so I was doing that, and I just decided, like, I'm not gonna do it anymore. I can't. Like, what's funny is, like, what are these metrics for creativity? Like, were listens going up? Like, maybe. How much were those responsible for listens? It's hard to tell. So I have two co-hosts on my podcast. Britt Pybus and Mike Boucher. Britt, Mike, if you guys are listening, you guys are the bomb. They're the best. Britt and Mike, they're the best. We love them. Britt, I first met Britt like 4 or 5 years ago when my kids were getting into Pokemon. I realized that like robotic gameplay of like, this is the optimal thing to play in like various situations. I mean, I couldn't help them, right? Like, my kids rapidly became better at Pokemon than I did. And so he was amongst the first ever like Pokemon coaches where he was like, I'm a top 10 player in the world for, and so people, I would teach kids how to play Pokemon all the time. Like we'd be sitting around like at a tournament and my kids would be off competing in the tournament. And there'd be little kids who came to the Pokemon tournament to see Pokemon tournaments and they didn't know how to play. And I would say, well, sit down and I'll teach you. And people would ask me all the time, like, oh, do you do coaching? Like, you could coach my kids. And I would always say to them, look, here's the problem with me coaching. The problem with me coaching is the amount that I would have to charge to justify me coaching is just a hell of a lot more than a top 15 player in the world who happens to be a senior in high school would feel like he needs to charge you to make it worth his while, right? Like, So you can find incredible coaches that charge like $15, $20 an hour. And like, they think they're making bank because they're literally getting paid to play Pokemon and they were going to play Pokemon anyway. So
that's how you get them.
Exactly. And the prices have gone up over the years. So like, I feel like, so Britt was like the first coach we ever hired to work with my eldest. And like, Britt's a really good guy. He tried to focus on his PhD and kind of took like a couple of years off, grinding out a PhD in like Eastern philosophy or something like crazy. But like, I think old school Pokemon and how to play like old formats is something he knows really, really well. And he is just one of those robotic players that like has, I think, an intuitive understanding of how to play the game. And then our third co-host, Mike Fouché, and we always say, Mike Fouché is the guy that powers the pod. He's a math teacher. So when you talk about this, like there is a correct play and there's an incorrect play, and like you just got to look at your hand and understand the probabilities and statistics. He has an intuitive feeling for the like statistical and probabilistic questions associated with Pokemon. And he has been playing since he was like 10. And, now he's in his mid-20s and he is easily one of the best players in the world. And, I think people tune in to get his hot takes. So my job in editing the pod is to go through and like all the comments that I have about decks, you can just delete all this because who cares? And then
do you really? So you're like not on the pod?
You're Britt and Mike and because Mike is like the power of the pod. Where everything is just a pause until we get to the next section where Mike will drop knowledge bombs on the people listening. Because
how much is the podcast and your book related? Like, is your book full of stuff from the podcast, or?
No, it turns out they're like totally different in that way. Like, so, I mean, the power of having Mike and Britt on the pod is like super inside baseball, right? Like, we're recording the pod later tonight, and what we're going to talk about is how strategy evolved from Brisbane to Utah to Liverpool over the course of 14 days. The quote best deck in the format, which is Mew deck, virtually swept Brisbane in Australia, and the deck that won Utah a week later was a deck that was really designed to just hard counter that deck. It didn't do anything else well, but it beat the crap out of that deck, and that was all it took to win.
Knowing that everyone would copy the winning deck, right?
Exactly. And then the deck that won Liverpool was like this weird, random mishmash of stuff that was just like the best probabilistic counter to the deck that would beat that deck and the Mew deck, because it was like the meta ended up being this weird mishmash of people trying to hard counter this like counter, but it was like a weird counter because it only did this one thing well. And like people who were still saying Mew is just the best deck, and if we just like make a tweak or two, we can counter that one deck and like other random weird stuff. So the meta over a course of 3 weeks of in-person play really like randomly evolved into this like crazy distribution of outcomes. And yet, once again, like we talked about how the game is RNG because you're shuffling your deck and you're randomly drawing cards from your deck and hoping for good outcomes. And I think as we demonstrated there, the same cards were legal for all three of those tournaments. So you could have easily brought the deck that won Liverpool to Australia and Brisbane or to Utah. And people were bringing the decks from Australia to Liverpool and Utah to Liverpool. But if you look at the people that won, the woman that won Brisbane, Natalie Millar, she's going to be on the pod tonight, so listen to Trashalanche tomorrow, people. She played Mew, and she had previously won the first Players' Cup Championship, which was Pokemon's first ever like online championship tournament like a year and a half ago. She won the first one. Like, they don't get any better than that. A world championship, she won it. Then in Utah, this guy Drew Bennett Kennett, who is a homie, we love Drew, won it. And Drew that's like the second or third regional championship that he's won. Like, he is a legend of weird deck building. Like, everybody knows Drew. Drew's a beast. And then the guy that won Liverpool was the world champion 3 years ago. Like, Robin Schultz is one of the half dozen best players in the game, and I think a big part of how he makes a weird mishmash deck that just has somewhat favorable outcomes against every matchup without being overwhelming against any matchup is like he's just better than all the players he's playing against. So like he can do that.
Yeah. So what are the prizes like, right? I mean, if you win one of these big tournaments.
Oh yeah. So let me finish.
Does it make a living off type prizes or?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. So the book is a totally different thing. The book is like the book that I always wanted to read when my kid was getting into Pokemon. If you know nothing about Pokemon, it is an amazing, perfect, beautiful, wonderful book available on Amazon today. Go buy it. It is like it is both how to play and then most importantly, like how to play well. Like there's lots and lots of instruction guides out there that will teach you how to play Pokemon, but none of them will teach you how do I build a deck that doesn't suck. This one kind of does. And the projects are in many ways completely disconnected because like I think I just thought I should produce more Like this was like it was a different art project that was vaguely related. So prizes. When we first got into Pokemon, the big prize you got when you go to a tournament was you got packs, and that was part of why we started to get into it. Was like my son wanted Pokemon cards, and I was like, I will not buy you Pokemon cards. I don't love you that much, child. Like that's just throwing money away. Who cares about that stuff? But like if he went to a tournament and he won some packs, we like got cards. So then we didn't need to buy cards. So I was like, we're doing a thing here. And people would always tell me, like people who had been in it for a long time, they're like, I'm good enough now. The Pokemon's like a self-funding thing where like I don't have to buy cards. People just like get cards. And I was like, that sounds ridiculous. Like that's not a real thing. It turns out it kind of is. It's amazing. But there's also, so in the last like 4 years, Pokemon's become much more like esports focused. When my eldest won the U.S. National Championship, $10,000 cash prize, people go get it. If you become the world champion, $25,000 cash prize. Every regional championship somebody wins, so these last 3 tournaments, I think it's like $5,000, maybe $2,500. I don't know. You can check on the Pokemon.com website if you really take an interest. Plus, they give you like boxes of cards. Like we talked about how booster boxes, you know, if you're in the top 8, you get like 2 or 3 booster boxes. You can sell those for $150 each if you want. Like smack yourself out if you want to turn that into cash. Or like if you want cards, you can open cards. So it's like
it sounds like the best couple players might make $100,000 a year.
No, they can't possibly make that much.
Okay.
I mean, so
how many of these tournaments are there? I mean, can you run?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's like maybe 10 to 15. There's like 10 to 12 regional championships that a person could realistically go to over the
so
course.
It's $100,000 that they're all splitting. Never mind.
Yeah,
all right. I got it. Let's try.
I feel like the best players make probably make like $30K. So there's this guy Isaiah Williams, and I think this is a good story. Like he was he had just finished up his freshman year at Stanford, and he won the Dallas Regionals in January, I guess. And he was finishing up his freshman year at Stanford and won Dallas Regionals. And I think he thought, you know, I could be, if I really focused, the best player in Pokemon. And so he took a gap year to just play Pokemon. And he won the Australian Continental Championship, flew down to Australia and won the whole tournament. And like that's the kind of thing that I think structurally, if you have a life that's not just playing Pokemon, it's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Like he did really well at a ton of tournaments. I think he definitely demonstrated he is one of the like 5 or 6 best players in Pokemon probably over the course of that gap year. And then he went back to Stanford because like you should go back to school. Stanford, it's a great school. But like, so there's some opportunity there. It's an interesting thing.
All right. We are coming up on 6:15 here. We've been going for an hour and 10 minutes here. So any parting thoughts?
Boy, is there anything I haven't covered that you want to hear me talk about? I don't know. Let me think.
I don't know. We talked about the book.
Yeah, this is the punchline. Yeah, I actually had brought this over here so I could do this for you. I don't know if you ever saw this. This is what you get when you top 4 at a world championship of Pokemon. It's a great statue. It's the statue.
Surprise Pikachu face.
It's a Pikachu holding a statue. That's fantastic, right?
That is fantastic.
So we went on a cruise with my wife's family, like, I don't know, 2 years. It was pre-pandemic times, so it must have been 2-3 years ago. And we reached out to the people that we knew that kind of ran Pokemon stuff and said, can we come by your office? Pokemon office in Seattle is absolutely extraordinary. Like, it just goes to show when you have an amazing marketing department and like an incredible brand, you can have super fun, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah,
so they're like huge statues all over and
huge statues all over. Huge Statue of Liberty. You know how they have you know how people have moss walls these days? They have a moss wall in the shape of a Pokeball. They had a wall that is like every Pokemon card ever printed. Just like they had a wall that is just plushes of every like Pokemon plush ever made. It's a crazy wall. That wall's bonkers. Doesn't make any sense.
How big is this place? Sounds huge.
Pokemon, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. They're making money on them cards. They could have a bigger prize pool than 150K. But
yeah,
if you go to Twitch and you watch like the Pokemon TCG stream, they are like they're doing what they can to try to up the like quality of esportsiness associated with the program. Like they have professional casters that I used to cast regionals. Now they've like real like content creation figures who are like casting the tournaments and stuff. It's like super duper buttoned up, and in that way it's nice. I mean, they have to continue to work at it because like at the end of the day, people are just playing a card game. Like the visuals are not nearly as exciting as like Fortnite, which I could talk about so much. We talk about Fortnite, we do a whole separate stream about Fortnite.
Yeah. So your son's live streaming Fortnite at all, or just playing?
He very, very infrequently streams Fortnite.
Sounds like I need him as the guest.
Yeah. I was telling you, like, yeah, in 6 months of having a Twitter account, he has like half as many followers as me. I've had a Twitter account for like 8 years now. And that kid. But yeah, like he's a believer that these people who like transition into content creation, they lose their mojo because they're too focused on content creation. Like Ninja and stuff like that. He's like, Ninja's terrible. And he's not wrong. Like Ninja is terrible now because Ninja's not focused on being the best. He's focused on being Ninja.
Getting
right?
Clicks, yeah.
And now my son's like, how do I get that money? And I'm like, well, you know, you have to do this thing. And when I tell them streamers have to do all these marketing activities besides just like streaming, he's like, oh, that sounds horrible. Oh my God. You have to tweet that you're streaming. You have to like take a picture every day and like post it and say you're going live. Oh, I don't want to do that. Like all the stuff that like, you know, you recognize like being a content creation person is like so like mentally draining because like, yeah, most of them are the work team, right? It's a big job.
Yeah. I remember as a teenager saying to my dad, wow, imagine having a job playing video games. And he was like, no. He's like, you say that now and then you get that job. And you have this boss who tells you what games to play. And even if you're not in the mood to play, you have to play. And it turns out it's just a job.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you read all these articles
That's negativity.
Who are like, I get up and like, I know I have to stream for like 12 hours today. And like, I have this commitment to blah, 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 blah. And like my stream numbers are down. So I need like something to happen, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh my God. Thank God I'm not too invested in the podcast because if I felt like how many people listened each week was some validation or worse still, like impacted my livelihood, man, that's stress. That's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. I think we're calling it an end here. So let's see. I think that our next thing will be tomorrow at 2:00. I will have some of the Speedify engineers on, and we will answer technical questions.
Just got to keep making that content. Keep making
2 p.m. 2 p.m. Eastern, 3 hours earlier than today, middle of the workday. We'll have some Speedify engineers and all those questions about APIs and hosting and bonding. We'll answer those tomorrow, and it will be exciting. So thank you so much, Brent. This was awesome. I think
Alex, thanks for having me on. People who are watching, Alex Gies is the absolute best. The authenticness that you get on this stream, he's even more authentic in person. Alex Gies is the absolute GOAT. You're doing the 100% right thing by supporting him.
Man, I will have you back. That's a great guest. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.